Hello, and welcome to another episode of Found It, Fetched It. This week, we're going to be talking all about how to not get pigeonholed in your dog training. Joining me for this week's episode is LWDG Group expert Claire Denny. How are you today, Claire?
I'm very well, thank you. I've just come back off the field, had some lovely clients today, and it's nice to get a nice warm cup of tea and sit and have a chat with you, Jo.
The weather has become particularly awful all of a sudden, without doubt. Today, let's talk about, I know that I went on this journey a little bit where you go on one training route and then it's normally the route that's given to you more than you choosing it by the person who you're following or the person who's introduced you to the sport. And then as you learn and you see more on social media, you start looking at other training options. And then I know for me, I got really confused. And then you look at more training options because you're confused and you're not getting any sort of results. But let's start about the whole fact, let's start at the beginning, Claire. What training method did you use at the beginning and why?
Yeah, so I don't think I've ever had a specific training method. I've always been a very open-minded person, training my own dogs as well as with clients on what does this dog need. That being said, there was a period of time in my journey when I was studying for a specific qualification where I had to do everything in that set way for 18 months, and I couldn't deviate off of that path. And although the journey of training and getting that qualification was very worthwhile, that always made me feel very stuck because that specific way didn't necessarily work with all dogs. It had limitations. And so I have been the sort of trainer who, and we all know, so we're not going to get deep into the fact that there's no real qualification for dog training. We know all about that. We know that. We've talked about it on other podcasts. But I made a real point of trying to get as much information, as much understanding about dogs behavior, dog training, different sports that I don't even do with my dogs, to give me a very broad knowledge. So to be very pigeonholed into this is how you must do this didn't fit right with me, because I always wanted to question whether what we were doing or what I was teaching and how the owner was interpreting that, whether or not that was right for that dog and that owner. So I think that has to be questioned all the time. And I think if you're being pigeonholed in whatever way, whether it's because somebody shows you this way or you're doing education that shows you this way, if you pigeonhole, you're limiting what help you can give. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do absolutely agree with you, and it does absolutely make sense. For me, I came into it from a different way from you. So Dad was self-trained, and what I mean by that is he read loads of books. He watched loads of, I've still got them today, like the DVDs. I think everyone had them. It was like how to trial your dog DVDs. I can't remember exactly what they called. They were by Ian Openshaw and other people like that. He had watched it over and over and over and over. He would have probably been able to recite it, but it gave him this foundation, for want of a better word, of how he trained. And he was very much a traditional trainer. He wasn't a harsh or abusive trainer, but his dogs were never given a moment to step out of line, if that makes sense. He was straight on them. There was no messing. So when I sort of started training the same way. I wasn't as on them, but that probably was because of my confidence lack. And I also think women tend to not be as on their dogs as men can be, and not in an aggressive way. Men are just very quick, when we're around children, men are very quick to correct. Women tend to have a little bit more, I don't know, for positive or negative. We tend to take a little bit more time to correct, I think, on average. So I started off like that, and that was one way. But then for me, I was almost the opposite to you. I was then leading this group of women who were all doing different things. So whereas you sort of got pigeonholed down, I got opened up. And I literally thought, oh, well, shall I do that? Shall I do that? Shall I do that? Shall I do that? And it literally, I would be absolutely honest with listeners, it fried my brain. Like I literally, the dog had no chance of knowing what was going on because I didn't.
Yeah. It makes it, yeah. Everything you've said just makes absolute sense. And I think one of the reasons it gets so confusing is because everybody thinks that their way is right. Everybody thinks their methodology is right because it may have worked with this dog or that dog, or maybe even a few dogs. But if you get pigeonholed into anything at all, you will come across a dog what that doesn't work on. And I think the thing that I find very difficult at the moment is all the labeling. I hate it. I hate all the labeling. I really hate it. I just train dogs. Well, actually, I teach owners how to train their dogs. I don't do board and train. So the only dogs I actually physically train are my own, unless I need to help an owner by showing them how to do it because they might be a visual learner. So me just standing there telling them what to do may not work for them. So I might have to actually physically show them what to do, but I'm coaching the owner. So not only do we have to look at the individual dog, but the individual owner and how that owner learns and how that owner, whether they can physically, and this is the thing, like when you're told by a gun dog trainer that you must stand in this position to send your dog on a retrieve, well, maybe you physically can't. Maybe you have a disability, or maybe you have an ailment that means you can't do that. So if you start pigeonholing, this is exactly how you should do this, then you might be making it very difficult for somebody to be able to even do that because it's not within their ability to do it. So I always say to people, you need to stand how you feel comfortable. Your arm is an arrow. It's pointing in the direction that you want the dog to run. You're not pointing at the dummy. You're pointing in a direction. And you have to stand in a way that is comfortable for you, but equally that's comfortable for your dog. Because if you watch some dogs, if you get too close to some dogs, the dog will, I'm doing hand gestures, and I've just realized, obviously being a podcast, none of the people listening can see this. So I need to be more descriptive. But if you're too close and too low with some dogs, they will lean away from you. So then they're not actually even lined up properly because they're leaning away. With other dogs, if you're too high or too upright and too straight, they're just looking around from left to right. They're not focused on anything. Have to find what works for the owner, how they feel very comfortable, but equally, how does that dog look with that? Is that dog comfortable with that? Is the dog understanding the picture that you're drawing? So the moment you come pigeonholed and you say, this is the way you must stand, well, that might only work for 50% of the people that you work with. So what happens to the rest of the 50%? Do you tell them they can't send their dog on a retrieve because they can't stand that way? I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
It is madness. And as I got introduced to so many different ways of training, and I was like, oh, I think this is the way I want to go. Claire remembers it. I was like, I really like how it would work for me. And then I tried it and I was like, actually, this doesn't agree with me at all. I have no issue saying I made a mistake. It would have been very hard for me to backtrack from that. But I'm quite open and I'll say I made a total mistake going down that route. That didn't suit me. It didn't suit my dogs. I'm backtracking. I'm going to try this route. But I do know we have a lot of listeners who they start on a route. They know it's not for them. They know it's not for the dogs. And for whatever reason, they don't want to say, I made a mistake. But then they pigeonhole themselves in a way that probably makes the sport really miserable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head the way that you just described that, because you feel like if you can't change your mind, and you absolutely can change your mind. I've changed my mind about loads of things over the last 8 years of doing this professionally. I've changed my mind about a lot of stuff. And we all have the right to change our mind, because you don't know what you always say, Joe, you don't know what you don't know. So until you learn something else or experience something else or see something else in a dog, if you hadn't seen that before, you don't know that. So what you might have been doing before, you were like, yeah, this is it, this is it. And then you come across that next dog and you go, this isn't it, not for this dog. And so you have the right to change your mind and to look at things that you've done and said, actually, we can do that better. And, I've definitely done that over the last years. If I look back at videos of me training indie before I did this professionally, I look at videos and I cringe because I'm literally like, my body language was awful. How on earth did my dog know what I was asking her to do? Because I don't look like I know what I'm doing at all. So I look back at those videos and I just think, nobody actually coached me at that point. And this is the difference. We've talked about this before with trainers. Some trainers just throw dummies around. They don't actually coach you. So I was going to see people for training, but nobody actually said to me, have a think about your body language, have a think about the way you're standing. Where's your dog looking? What's your dog doing? I was winging it most of the time. So I look back at those videos and I'm like, God, how did my dog ever get a retrieve? Because I was rubbish. But then I only have to look back then another. Rose is 4.5 now. So I only have to look back 4 years ago and I can see little things that I've altered and changed and developed since then, since she was a puppy, because you have to evolve and develop and improve yourself all the time. But you can't stay rigid when we're learning continually.
And I think this is the problem we're seeing. Like, I get quite a lot of emails, not so many now, I think, because we've been very clear as an organization, but the people wanting to pigeonhole us as an organization. What type
Yeah.
of training organization are you? And like, you remember, Claire, the emails, you remember my replies, and it was like, we're not a specific type of training organization. We don't agree with harsh handling, but apart from that, we're open to everyone. We don't want you to do anything that hurts the dog physically or emotionally. Other than that, let's see what's gonna, come in, what people learn, what people do. Culturally, we deal with people from all over the world, so we have very different styles of training. Me and you were talking this week about a style of training in Hungary, which is a style of training we hadn't seen or we hadn't been used to seeing in our ladies. And I think if we pigeonholed, think of all the women we wouldn't be able to help. Because if we put up those barriers and said, well, oh, actually, if you train like that, you can't come in, then it has the same effect, doesn't it? It stops learning. And really, if we stop pigeonholing ourselves, our organizations, we actually encourage better progression of dog training.
Yes, 100%, 100%. I have loads of trainers train with me, loads, and I really welcome them. I really welcome them because I'm a big believer in collaboration, and that's something that I've learned to fully embrace thanks to you and the LWDG, because there is a lot of nastiness out there in the dog training world, not just in the gun dog training world, but in the dog training world all over. There's a lot of nastiness. There's a lot of my way or the highway, or them people that do this and that. And it's horrible out there. But the LWDG has like given people a place to feel safe and to come to. And I have a lot of trainers training with me and I really welcome them. But the thing that I think I can find quite frustrating is when trainers train with me and I can see that what we're doing is working with their dogs, but they can't do that with their clients. They can't, because the organization that they're with would come down on them because they're using a slip lead, or because they're doing this, or because they're doing that, or not doing this and not doing that. And I think that when organizations do this to trainers, they are trying to pigeonhole them, which is what we're talking about, but they're also forcing that trainer, and it's very unfair because they're forcing that trainer to not be authentic. Because if they can come and train with me and they can see that you can use a slip lead correctly, which isn't harsh, and you're not hurting the dog and you're not creating fear or pain, but then they can't go and do the same with their client because they will be outed for doing that. That's something terribly wrong with this industry, isn't it?
Yeah, and of everything, it's frustrating, but it's also incredibly sad because we've been the outdid organization as well, haven't we? Like, if you, again, me and you sat and talked this for hours, people we've never met, we've never had a conversation with, we've never had any dealings with at all, absolutely blackening our names when they don't know anything about us. And had they come to us and said, can we collaborate? We would have said absolutely yes, because we are about that. We are about open dialogue. And I
Yeah.
think if you look at it, a lot of the nastiness does come from, like you just said, my way or the highway. I am controlling the narrative. Nobody else
Yeah.
can go against me. But they just make long-term dogs suffer, because we have owners who can't train their dogs a certain way because they don't know that way. Trainers who can't train a dog a certain way because they're not allowed to train their dog that way. Organizations who can't work with other organizations because that's not allowed either. And that's all we
Yeah.
do is we basically make almost fractions that can't come together to work in the interests of the dog.
Yeah. And the people that suffer as an end result of that are the dogs and their owners. They're the people that suffer as a result of this. One of the reasons I'm so welcoming to other trainers is because I have nothing to hide in my training. What you see me do with my dogs is what I do with clients' dogs. I would never get a client to do something with their dog that I wouldn't do with my own dog. Okay. The welfare of the dog is always at the forefront, but so is clarity. So we have to give dogs clarity to take away frustration. A lot of the time when we see frustration with dogs is because there's no clarity in the training. It's a very grey area. The dog doesn't understand what is and isn't allowed. The dog doesn't understand the difference between this and that. That's created because of muddy training, and that can all be taken away, and dogs can have better lives if we have clarity in our training, if the methods we're using work and are in the best welfare of the dog long term. This takes you down the rabbit hole, doesn't it? Almost, of things like where some people will say death before discomfort. I mean, who comes up with a sentence like that? Who would put death before a minuscule moment of discomfort? And when you say that, everybody jumps on the bandwagon and immediately thinks you're talking about using e-collars and prong collars and things like that. I don't use them. No, I don't use those things. So it's like, who said that? Who even said that? For me, a moment of discomfort could be merely the dog being told for 30 seconds, that's off the plate, mate. That is not something you can do anymore. And the dog gets frustrated for maybe 30 seconds and then the lesson is learned. The lesson is learned. That's it, done, over. Better that than that owner has to rehome their dog, or worse still, puts them to sleep because they're not allowed to give the dog that clarity.
I can always remember conversations, and if you look through our podcast right at the very beginning, we talk about like where's the middle ground. But when you've got one end of the spectrum saying death before discomfort, and you've got the other end of the spectrum saying swing them round by their ears until they get the message, I look at both ends of that spectrum and I think, I don't want to be either end with either of you, because both of you are putting your own egos and your own beliefs above what's best for the dog. Because if you knew this, you wouldn't do that to that dog. And if you knew this, you wouldn't put it down rather than telling it no. So I just literally think we get frustrated, I think, as an organization, as a group, as a community. And I think I can't speak for all women. Please tell me, ladies, if you are in our community, and I don't speak for you. You have to train the dog in front of you. And if the dog in front of you is quite frankly an a-hole, and they do exist, sometimes you have to tell an a-hole no. And like you said, it doesn't mean throwing a prong collar on it or any of that nonsense. But that could be putting them back on the lead because they keep on running in. I'm sitting and waiting so they turn. That is not a bad thing. That is a good thing that teaches good manners. And just like our parents taught us good manners, why would we not teach our dogs good manners? So I just don't understand why people are pigeonholing themselves to a side of the spectrum that they don't believe can be taught any other way. But also the other thing that I think that frustrates me even more is they go to war for their end. They say, oh, our way's right and there's no other way right and you lot are all wrong. And I'm like, we can't all be wrong because we've all got really good dogs that are winning trials and winning tests. So what is it that we're doing wrong?
I think this is the thing. So as a trainer, having, and when I say tools, I'm not talking about physical tools. I'm just talking about maybe methods, techniques, ideas, creative thinking. So when I have 1,000 tools in my toolbox of what I might do with a dog, until I meet that dog and until I've sussed that dog out and the handler out and looked at the relationship, I don't know what I'm going to use. I have no idea. I have no idea until I meet that dog. And I've been in situations so many times over the years where clients have genuinely thought that I am a positive only or a force-free trainer because they've never seen me do anything which would be deemed cruel, ever. And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm not. Because you know that thing we did? That wasn't force-free. The dog didn't have an option. We didn't say to the dog, you go fill your boots, do what you want to do, you know." And then they're really shocked and they're like, "Oh, right. So a correction doesn't mean X, Y, or Z." And I'm like, hell no, not for me. It doesn't anyway. It never means harsh. It never means cruel or abusive. It never means physically harming the dog or anything like that. And so I think it's kind of crazy when you think that people are pigeonholing themselves when actually they could be gathering thousands of tools for their toolbox to be able to help so many more dogs with so many more problems. But when somebody says to me, "So how will you fix this?" I can't tell them until I know the dog. I can't tell them. I don't know until I know the dog because every dog is unique. So you have to think like that. And if you pigeonhole yourself, there's no way you can think like that.
If you think about it, all our dogs have got such different personalities like we have as humans. Like the conversations, even like text messages and stuff like I have with you, the way I write to you might not be the way I write to Jem, might not be the way I write to Sam. You have personal relationships that are built on the history behind it, aren't they? Like, so with Jem, I probably banter with Jem more than anyone because Jem gives me a boost, I give Jem a boost in the loveliest possible way, right?
Yeah.
It's part of our relationship. Whereas I think if I did that with somebody else, like my daughter Charlotte, she'd be like, "What's this message about?" And I'd be like, "Oh, that's not right for you. That wouldn't have been the way I talk to you because I know how to
Yeah.
not handle's the wrong word, but we do know how to handle our relationships." So I think with our dogs, we have to do the same, don't we? We have to go like, how do I handle you? Do I do this? Do I do this? What about this? And sometimes you learn through error. I have learned what I can get away with and with Ella and Rex from sometimes getting it wrong. Like, Ella will literally stick her two B's up on me as she thinks she wants to do something differently. So now we have this sort of like level playing field where I sort of say to her, right at the beginning of the train session, "Listen to me now, David, we're not having this today." That's literally the conversation. I
Yeah.
never have that conversation with Rex. And then you'll be the same with you with Dre. So people who are like, "Oh, it's only one way and you're going to do this exam and every dog will fit inside this exam." I'm like, well, I call bullshit and I just made this explicit because you can't, because not every dog will.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love what you just said. Yeah, you just called bullshit. But it is, and that's exactly it. And I think we have to have these really honest conversations because otherwise, if nobody speaks out and says this stuff, then it won't change. It won't change if nobody speaks out. And it's like when I work with these trainers, they come to watch me teach a class or they come and shadow me or whatever, you know, that's all very well, but there's no point in them leaving and not changing anything. No point to that at all. That's just a waste of my time because authenticity is so important as a trainer. You should train your own dog in the same way that you believe your clients should train their dogs, genuinely, unless you're a really harsh handler, and then you definitely shouldn't. But my point is, trainers shouldn't be saying that you can't tell a dog no, or you can't do this, or this tool can't be used, this slip lead can't be used, because if you know that for your own dog, that's not fitting. And I see this so much, and it's a real genuine frustration. Actually, I find it really hard because I just think it's unfair, but I don't blame the trainers. I blame the organizations that are forcing people into that corner and they don't feel they can be authentic and they don't feel that they can truly show the work that works.
An email I had this week, which I discussed with Claire, was somebody from a different country who said, I'm really unhappy with the
Yep.
trainer because they taught my dog to hold by choking it on a lead until it vomited saliva, and then it learned the lesson. Now, to me and you, we were understandably horrified. Understandably horrified. However, had I then said to this person with that trainer, you can never come to this group, we cannot help you, this is disgusting, blah, blah, blah. All I did is isolate that person into that training. I forced the pigeonhole. I built the wall. But instead of saying, well, that's not how we train it. This is how we train it. Why don't you look at how we train it? See if that fits better with you. I could tell from the email the person wasn't even comfortable with training anyway. I opened the door. And said, come and look what we've got that might work for you. And I think that's the bit we're not seeing is if we open doors and say, well, come and pick what works for you. Like you said, come and pick the tools that you think, well, I might not use that with this dog, but I'll definitely use that with this dog. And I'll pick this bit and I'll pick this and allow you to be like you're in a sweet shop, picking the bits that suit the dog in front of you. When we get to that, our dogs win. Until we get to that, and I don't say this with any ego because that's not who I am, but there needs to be more organizations like ours that say, come here and swap, learn in a safe place, swap your ideas. We have trainers come in who's force-free and positive only, and we let them swap ideas because we know that over long term, our ideas might help them save a dog.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I think there needs to be a lot more welcoming, a lot more inclusion. That's the word, inclusion, than there is currently out there. And all the while that isn't happening, it's the owners and the dogs that suffer. And I think if more trainers recognize that, and instead of working against each other, absolutely, there are certain things that they are pure abuse and those people need to be hammered for that. They should be hammered for that. I just think there's just no other, swinging a dog around on a lead, choking a dog off, any of those things are just not acceptable. They're not acceptable and they're not necessary. And what is it? Is that just you trying to prove that you're bigger and stronger than the dog? Like, it's all wrong. That's completely wrong. But outside of that, where there's no abuse and there's no harm and physical or mental harm, I think people should be way more open-minded to listening to each other's mythology, techniques, ideas, because you might just learn something.
And that's the point, isn't it? I completely 100% disagree with harsh handling. However, and I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here, is it a case that those harsh trainers do not know another way? If that is part of your culture, your norm, your everyday, it doesn't teach the harsh handlers better ways, we will never, ever move forward, because the only way we eradicate is to educate.
And that's why showing the work is so important. That's why, because it's all very well people saying, I don't need to use that. I use much more positive methods that don't do this, and that's not necessary. Well, show it then. Show your work, because that's the only way that people will see that, and I think that's why our masterclasses are so fabulous. You've got masterclasses by group experts whom are showing multiple ways of doing stuff without using harsh techniques. That's exactly it. So we're already doing that to our audience and saying, well, look, so for instance, if you take my hold and delivery masterclass, probably 20 odd techniques in there, depending on the dog, like loads of techniques. It's not just, this is how Claire says you should do a hold and delivery. No. It's, you could try this way. You could try this. You could try this. You could try this, or you could try that. Find out what works for your dog. It's not about my way. These are loads and loads of ideas and concepts that I've picked up and learned through working with hundreds of dogs. And I've just gone, have a little look at this. Have a little look at this. And in doing so, you're opening people's minds to there is more one way than one day to do this. And at no point am I putting a dog through pain and discomfort to get them to hold a dummy. So it shows there are 20 or more ways that you can do it without pain and discomfort.
For people who are listening and they are either end of the spectrum or somebody in the middle, or they're trainer, let's deal with trainers first. If you're a trainer who has accidentally pigeonholed themselves, like you did, how do you get out of it?
How do you get out of it? I think if you're with an organization, this is really hard to say, but I'm just going to say it. If you're with an organization who is forcing you to be pigeonholed to something that you know has limitations, you need to get out of that and get yourself with an organization or a group of people that is working with the individual dog in front of you. For a trainer, that's what I would say. Genuinely, don't be with an organization that's pigeonholing you.
And if you are an owner and you're like, oh, I just don't know what to do. How do I choose? We've covered they shouldn't pigeonhole themselves. But what would you say to the disenchanted trainer who's whatever they're doing as an owner isn't working? What should they do?
So we're looking at the
Yes.
owner here. Right. So for the owner, if you're seeing a trainer and this trainer is demonstrating to you repeatedly that they have one way of doing it, and if it's not working, they're blaming you and the dog. This is not the right trainer for you. They're not working with the dog and the owner in front of them. So you need to find yourself a trainer who is willing to experiment, try, troubleshoot, and be prepared to think outside the box, to work with you to get you and your dog to where you want to be. Not just, if a trainer says to you, this dog is too much for you, or if this dog was with a different owner, or if, oh, it's the breeding, the dog's not right for the breeding. That for me is just little sentences that would say that trainer doesn't have enough tools in their toolbox to work with you and your dog. So they should be saying, okay, so it could be that your dog is feeling this way about this situation because of this. So let's try this. And let's try this for a period of time. And if that doesn't work, we're going to try a different approach with your dog. And we'll see how your dog feels about that. And be prepared to troubleshoot with you, because every dog is different. So even though I work with a lot of dogs with hold and delivery issues and we overcome those issues, I might work with a dog tomorrow that throws me something that I haven't seen before. I'm then going to have to use all my tools in my toolbox, or perhaps create a new one. And I'm prepared to do that. So that's what my advice would be around that.
Thank you for another fantastic podcast episode. We really do hope, ladies and gentlemen, that you have enjoyed listening to us. We cover these topics not lightheartedly, but because we know from the multiple emails that we get every single week that there are many disenchanted owners, disenchanted trainers who are genuinely emotionally suffering because they cannot move forward. And we hate to see that. You all probably hate to see that. So we want to start addressing some of those issues. Thank you, Claire, for another fabulous podcast. If you're listening, Claire, where can they find you?
So you can find me on the LWDG, both on the open group, I'm contactable via them, or in the membership, or you can email me at claire@familydogservices.co.uk, or find me on Facebook, either through Family Dog Services or Claire Denya.
We hope you all enjoy. We hope you're all having a fabulous time. Please review our podcast. Give us some feedback. We love to know. If there's any topic you want us to cover, please let us know. And we look forward to speaking to you all next week. Goodbye.